There's a certain peace that comes when you stop letting other people's opinions dictate your self-worth. We spend so much of our lives trying to please, impress, and fit in with expectations that were never ours to begin with. The truth is, you will never find freedom in approval. You'll only find it in authenticity. When you stop living to be liked, you start living to be true. Being unbothered isn't about arrogance or indifference. It's about emotional maturity, self-trust, and the quiet power of knowing who you are even when others don't understand it. So today, let's talk about how to train your heart and mind to be unbothered, to stop caring what others think, and start living the life that's meant for you. The first step in training yourself to be unbothered is understanding that most people's opinions have very little to do with who you actually are. Every human being views the world through their own emotional lens, shaped by upbringing, trauma, fears, and experiences. When someone criticizes you, dismisses your dreams, or questions your choices, it's often a projection of their own insecurities and limitations. They might not be attacking you directly. They're reacting to something in you that triggers what they haven't yet resolved within themselves. Maybe your courage reminds them of their fear. Maybe your success reminds them of what they haven't achieved. Maybe your happiness highlights their dissatisfaction. Once you recognize that most judgments are mirrors, not windows, you begin to take things far less personally. You begin to see that their perception is simply a reflection of their inner world, not a definition of your worth. We often internalize people's opinions because we're taught that others' validation confirms our value. From a young age, we're conditioned to please, to be good, agreeable, and acceptable. We learn that harmony is safety and that being liked equals being worthy. But as adults, this mindset traps us in emotional dependency. We start chasing approval as though it were air to breathe, forgetting that external validation is never stable. It shifts with people's moods, biases, and blind spots. What someone admires in you today, they may resent tomorrow. When you allow their praise or criticism to shape your identity, you become a reflection of their expectations instead of your truth. Understanding that people's opinions are transient and unreliable liberates you. It allows you to build your sense of self from within rather than borrowing it from others who are still figuring out their own. Every person you meet carries an invisible story, a story you can't see, but one that shapes how they interpret your life. Their judgments, reactions, and assumptions are filtered through that unseen narrative. Someone raised in an environment where perfection was demanded may judge your freedom as carelessness. Someone who's never taken risks may label your bravery as recklessness. Someone who has been hurt by others' honesty may misinterpret your transparency as cruelty. This is why taking every opinion personally becomes exhausting, because it assumes everyone's worldview is balanced and objective, when in truth, it's deeply personal. When you understand this, you begin to separate perception from reality. You start thinking, this is how they see me, but that doesn't mean it's who I am. You reclaim your power by recognizing that you can honor someone's perspective without accepting it as truth. The real test of emotional maturity is how calmly you respond to misunderstanding. People will misread your intentions. They'll judge your silence as arrogance or your boundaries as coldness. Some will criticize you simply because you don't behave in the way they expect. When that happens, your instinct might be to explain yourself, to justify your choices, or to defend your reputation. But that reaction gives their opinion power over your peace. Training yourself To be unbothered means resisting that impulse. It means being rooted enough in your truth that you no longer feel the need to persuade others to see it. It's realizing that you are not responsible for managing anyone's perception of you. Their misunderstanding does not decrease your integrity. Their noise does not define your truth. The more you practice this detachment, the lighter your spirit becomes because you stop carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to bear. Finally, when you accept that people's opinions are reflections of themselves, not reflections of you, you create an invisible boundary between your inner peace and their emotional chaos. You learn to stand in your own energy without absorbing theirs. You start seeing criticism, gossip, and misunderstanding as neutral data points instead of emotional attacks. Someone might project anger because they feel powerless. Someone might belittle you because your confidence threatens their insecurity. You stop personalizing it because you understand it's not about you. You can observe without reacting, listen without internalizing, and exist without defending. That's where true peace begins, not in controlling how others see you, but in mastering how you see yourself. The moment you realize that people's words are simply mirrors of their own experience, you free yourself from their opinions and return to your center, calm, grounded, and beautifully unbothered. Detaching your worth from external validation is one of the most transformative steps in learning to be unbothered. For most of our lives, we've been conditioned to see our value through the eyes of others, to measure ourselves by praise, recognition, and approval. From the time we're children, we're rewarded for good grades, for good behavior, for fitting into what others find acceptable. This conditioning teaches us that love and belonging are earned through performance, not authenticity. As adults, that mindset becomes a silent trap. We chase validation through work, relationships, and appearances, believing that being liked or admired is proof that we matter. But here's the truth: no amount of approval can fill the emptiness of self-doubt. External validation is temporary. It fades, it shifts, it depends on factors you can't control. True peace begins when you stop performing for acceptance and start living from self-acceptance. When you base your worth on how others respond to you, you give them emotional authority over your life. Their approval becomes your oxygen, and their rejection becomes your suffocation. You start shaping your actions, your words, and even your identity to fit what you believe they'll approve of. But the moment you hand your worth over to others, you lose the freedom to be yourself. The truth is, people's approval is fickle. It changes with their moods, their circumstances, and their own insecurities. You could spend your entire life trying to please everyone and still be misunderstood. Freedom is not found in being liked. It's found in being real. You are allowed to exist as you are, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You are allowed to stand firm in your truth, even if no one claps for it. Detaching from validation doesn't mean you don't care about others. It means you care about yourself enough to not let their opinions determine your peace. This shift requires daily practice because our minds are wired for belonging. We want to feel accepted, seen, and loved. It's part of being human. But emotional maturity is learning to meet those needs within yourself first. It means giving yourself the approval you've been waiting for from others. When you achieve something meaningful, celebrate it quietly without needing to post it or be praised for it. When you make a hard decision, affirm your strength without asking if it was right in someone else's eyes. Every time you validate yourself, you weaken the hold external opinions have on you. Over time, your confidence becomes self-generated, not dependent on outside applause. That's the essence of being unbothered. You stop waiting for permission to feel worthy. You realize that worthiness is not something to earn, it's something you were born with. It's also important to understand that validation is not inherently bad. It becomes toxic when it's your main source of self-esteem. Compliments, recognition, and appreciation can be beautiful when they come as a bonus, not a necessity. The difference lies in where your emotional anchor is placed. When it's rooted in others, you're easily shaken. But when it's rooted in self-trust, external opinions can flow through you without destabilizing you. Think of it like standing in the ocean waves of approval, and disapproval will always come. But when you're grounded, you don't get swept away. You might feel the pull, but you remain centered. You don't need to reject praise or ignore feedback. You just learn to receive it with gratitude, not dependence. You understand that someone else's recognition can't make you more valuable. It can only echo what you already know within yourself. In the end, detaching your worth from external validation is about reclaiming ownership of your identity. It's about standing tall in who you are, regardless of who's watching. The quietest confidence comes from knowing that your self-worth doesn't rise or fall with anyone's opinion. You stop performing and start living. You stop chasing and start being. You stop seeking proof and start believing. When you reach that level of inner security, you'll notice something remarkable. People's approval no longer feels like a reward, and their disapproval no longer feels like a wound. You become unshakable because your value no longer depends on their vision. You are enough, not because they said it, but because you finally know it. One of the hardest parts of becoming truly unbothered is learning to sit with discomfort, especially the discomfort that comes from being misunderstood, disliked, or criticized. Our instinct as human beings is to fix what feels wrong, to make people like us again, to smooth over tension, or to explain ourselves until everyone sees our intentions clearly. But emotional strength grows not from fixing everything, but from being able to endure what can't be fixed. When someone doesn't approve of you, when people talk behind your back, or when your choices challenge their expectations, there's an immediate urge to correct their perception. You want to defend yourself because the silence feels unbearable. Yet, the real growth happens when you resist that impulse. When you allow the discomfort to exist without rushing to make it go away, you begin to understand that peace is not the absence of tension. It's the ability to stay grounded within it. Discomfort is not your enemy, it's your teacher. Every moment of unease, rejection, or misunderstanding reveals what parts of you still seek external reassurance. When someone's opinion hurts you, it's often not their words, it's the story you attach to them. You start thinking, maybe they're right, maybe I'm not good enough. But those thoughts don't reflect truth, they reflect wounds. The discomfort exposes where healing is needed. It shows you where your self-trust still wavers. When you can sit quietly with that feeling without distracting yourself, without running from it, you start to build resilience. You start to separate who you are from what people think of you. That space between reaction and reflection becomes sacred. It's where your peace begins to grow roots. Over time, you learn that you can experience discomfort without letting it control your actions or define your worth. We live in a world that glorifies control and comfort. The idea of being unbothered often gets confused with pretending not to care, acting detached, or numbing your emotions. But real calm doesn't come from suppressing your feelings. It comes from holding them without letting them rule you. You can feel hurt and still stay kind. You can feel misunderstood and still stay quiet. You can feel criticized and still stay centered. That's emotional discipline. The more you practice sitting with uncomfortable feelings, the more your nervous system learns that discomfort isn't dangerous. You stop reacting impulsively just to make the feeling go away. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop seeking validation as a way to soothe insecurity. You realize that being unbothered isn't about not feeling. It's about feeling deeply and still choosing peace. There's a quiet kind of power that comes when you stop defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Some people aren't looking for truth, they're looking for control. They want to provoke a reaction to see if they can disturb your balance. When you refuse to react, when you can hold your composure, even when every part of you wants to fight back, you take your power back. Sitting in that discomfort without trying to fix it tells the world, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to you. This kind of restraint doesn't mean weakness. It's strength in its purest form. It's the discipline of self-trust, the kind that whispers, I'll be okay even if they don't understand me. That is emotional maturity responding with peace instead of panic, grace instead of guilt. As you master this practice, you start to notice a shift inside yourself. Situations that once triggered anxiety or defensiveness no longer hold the same weight. You stop needing closure from every misunderstanding. You stop explaining your silence. You stop apologizing for not fitting into someone else's comfort zone. The discomfort still comes. It always will. But it no longer defines your peace. You simply breathe through it, knowing it will pass. That's what it means to be unbothered, not that life is always easy or that people suddenly treat you kindly, but that you've built the inner capacity to stay centered through it all. You've learned that peace isn't found in fixing others' perceptions. It's found in staying whole, even when the world around you doesn't understand you. One of the most defining traits of an unbothered person is discernment. The quiet wisdom to know what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Life will constantly offer you opportunities to be offended, to argue, to defend, and to react. Every comment, every misunderstanding, every little spark of conflict can tempt you to step into chaos. But the truth is, not everything needs a response. Protecting your peace means understanding that your energy is sacred. It's the fuel that sustains your emotional well-being, focus, and happiness. When you waste it on proving yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you deplete the energy that could have been used to build your peace, your purpose, or your dreams. Choosing your battles wisely doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to know that your time and mental space are not infinite. We often think that staying silent means we've lost, that walking away means we've surrendered. But the opposite is true. Walking away from unnecessary conflict is one of the highest forms of strength. It means you've reached a point where you no longer need to win every argument or correct every false assumption. You've learned that some people argue not to understand, but to dominate, not to learn, but to drain. When you engage with that kind of energy, you give away your power. Protecting your peace is not avoidance. It's emotional strategy. It's saying, I refuse to set myself on fire just to prove I'm not cold. When you stop reacting to every provocation, you reclaim the mental stillness that allows you to stay focused on what actually matters. You stop living on emotional defense and you start living with intention. Energy protection also means being selective about your environments and the people you allow into your emotional space. You can't stay unbothered if you constantly surround yourself with chaos. Some people thrive on drama. Some find comfort in negativity because it validates their worldview. If you're constantly exposed to that, a kind of energy, it seeps into you. Being unbothered doesn't just happen through mindset. It happens through boundaries. You have to be willing to limit access, even to people you care about, if their presence consistently disrupts your peace. Protecting your energy may mean fewer conversations, smaller circles, and quieter routines. But what you lose in noise, you gain in clarity. You begin to realize that solitude isn't loneliness. It's a sanctuary. It's where your mind rests, your intuition sharpens, and your confidence grows. Another part of protecting your energy is learning the art of non-reaction. The moment you start reacting to every opinion, every rumor, every negative comment, you become emotionally enslaved to other people's behavior. Not every action deserves a reaction, and not every insult requires a response. Silence, when used intentionally, is not weakness. It's control. It's the ability to stand firm in your truth without needing validation from anyone. When someone tries to provoke you, your stillness confuses them because they expected chaos. When you respond calmly instead of angrily, you show mastery over your emotions. You begin to embody quiet strength. The kind that says, I see what you're doing, but you no longer have access to my peace. That is how you conserve your emotional energy and maintain your inner power. Ultimately, protecting your energy and choosing your battles wisely is about prioritizing your inner calm over external control. You stop needing to manage how people see you, what they say about you, or how they interpret your silence. You understand that not every situation requires your involvement, and not every opinion deserves your attention. You start living with emotional economy, spending your energy where it brings growth, joy, and purpose. When you live this way, your mind becomes quieter, your reactions slower, and your spirit lighter. You begin to move through the world differently, not because it's easier, but because you've learned the discipline of inner peace. That's the true essence of being unbothered, not ignoring life's chaos, but mastering the calm that allows you to rise above it. The final step in becoming truly unbothered is learning to live in alignment with your values rather than the shifting expectations of others. People will always have opinions about who you should be, how you should act, and what choices you should make, but their expectations are built on their experiences, not your purpose. When you live to meet their standards, you begin to lose touch with your own truth. You start performing instead of living. Every time you bend yourself to fit someone's image of who you should be, you trade authenticity for approval. But peace, the kind of deep, lasting peace that no one can take away, only comes from alignment. It's born in the moments when your choices reflect what you genuinely believe, not what others demand. Being unbothered doesn't mean being rebellious for the sake of it. It means being loyal to your truth, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or misunderstood. Living in alignment requires clarity. You must know what your values are, what really matters to you beyond status, success, or appearance. Maybe it's kindness, freedom, integrity, faith, or honesty. When your life aligns with those values, you start to feel grounded no matter who agrees or disagrees with you. People might still criticize you, but their words no longer hold the same power because you're not living for them. You're living with yourself. For example, if your core value is peace, You won't entertain arguments that rob you of it. If your value is truth, you won't hide behind lies just to keep others comfortable. If your value is growth, you won't stay small to fit into their expectations. When your actions reflect your principles, your confidence grows naturally because you're no longer fragmented by conflicting identities. You're no longer trying to be everything for everyone. You're simply being yourself. There's an incredible freedom in realizing that you don't need to convince anyone of your choices. You can quietly do what aligns with your heart and let your life speak for itself. When you live for approval, you become reactive, constantly adjusting yourself to please others. But when you live from alignment, you become intentional. You stop chasing validation and start walking your own path, even when it's lonely. That kind of self-trust is magnetic. It attracts respect, even from those who once judged you. And more importantly, it brings inner stillness. Because deep down, you know you're not betraying yourself anymore. Every no you say to others becomes a yes to your peace. Every decision rooted in your values strengthens your sense of identity. You stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, does this feel right to me? That's the mindset of someone who's truly unbothered. But this alignment is not always easy. It often requires disappointing people who expected you to play a certain role. It means walking away from environments, relationships, or habits that no longer fit your truth. It may even mean standing alone for a while. Yet, there's a profound kind of peace that comes from standing alone in truth rather than surrounded by people in pretense. The path of alignment can feel isolating, but it's also where you find your authentic self, the version of you that doesn't depend on applause to feel valuable. As you live more in tune with your values, your boundaries become clearer, your choices more intentional, and your voice more confident. You no longer measure success by approval, but by integrity. You begin to define happiness not by how things look, but by how they feel inside. Living aligned with your values means living in emotional freedom. You no longer carry the heavy burden of trying to manage perceptions or earn acceptance. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into other people's comfort zones. You begin to understand that authenticity is not about perfection. It's about honesty. It's about showing up as who you are, not who others want you to be. The opinions of others will always fluctuate, but your values will remain your anchor. They remind you of who you are when the world tries to tell you who you should be. When your life reflects that alignment, you become untouchable, not because nothing affects you, but because nothing can pull you away from yourself. That is the essence of being unbothered, living so deeply connected to your truth that no amount of noise can make you doubt your worth, your direction, or your peace. Being unbothered isn't about becoming emotionless, distant, or cold. It's about becoming grounded in who you are. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that no external opinion, rejection, or misunderstanding can shake it. The world will always have something to say. People will always project their fears, their insecurities, and their judgments onto you. But when you're rooted in self-awareness, you stop absorbing their noise and start protecting your peace. You learn to respond instead of react, to release instead of resist, and to trust yourself even when others don't. The journey to becoming unbothered is not one of arrogance, but of liberation. It's realizing that you don't need to prove your goodness, your strength, or your success to anyone. You don't need to convince people who are determined not to see you clearly. You begin to understand that silence is power, That peace is wealth, and that authenticity is freedom. When you live by your values, your confidence grows quietly from within. You no longer chase validation. You attract respect simply by being genuine. In the end, being unbothered is not about indifference. It's about intentionality. It's choosing peace over performance, truth over approval, and purpose over popularity. It's knowing that your time, your energy, and your spirit are too precious to waste on what doesn't serve your growth. You become so centered in your truth that you no longer seek permission to exist. You simply are. So train yourself to be unbothered, not because the world will stop judging, but because you've learned that judgment can't define you. Stand tall in your silence. Move gracefully through misunderstanding. Protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And remember, the goal is not to escape the noise of the world, but to build such a strong inner calm that no amount of noise can disturb it. That is the quiet strength of the unbothered soul.